Hey there, everyone. It's CPO here, and I'm going to go through the build of my flight model Apollo 50. This is a pattern or precision style plane, and this is less of a how-to and more of a how-did. This is just me going through my build. So you may have done things differently, or you may get some ideas out of this. I definitely learned a lot along the way myself. So what I'm going to work on this first video is the wing assembly. So as you can see, the ailerons are taped in place, but they're not hinged. So we're going to have to hinge those up. I'm not going to turn this into a how to hinge video, but it does come with the little fabric hinges and the CA hinges as they're known. And I'm going to put those in. The hinges are in this bag of stuff. There's a bag that we're going to start tearing into and dragging things out. So anyway, pretty simple. If you've hinged before, a great learning opportunity if you haven't. And this is my second build to use CA hinges, and it definitely gets easier every time. But there are going to be 4 hinges for each aileron, and the hinge slots are pre-cut. Although you may find you need to, take a razor or a hinge slot tool to widen if necessary. But the key here is to get them centered. There are a lot of different methods for that. Like I said, I'm not going to turn this into a how-to video. You can use pins or not pins or whatever. I ended up not using pins and felt like I was getting the hinges centered pretty well. But get everything lined up. Move the surface in both directions to get it loosened, and then add thin CA to lock those in place. One tip here that I'll share with you that I do is I put some tape, actually the same masking tape that's used to hold the ailerons in place on the wing before it was hinged. I use that as a marker for where the hinges are so that it's quicker to find when I'm actually, adding CA. So anyway, do that on both wings. And then the next thing I did is added the servos. And you'll find where the little servo cutout is, a little rectangular cutout. And you need to cut the covering there. And cut, don't tear, because if you tear, it's always going to go further than you thought it would. So with the way this works, there are there's a string inside when they built the wing that you can use to drag your servo wire to the outside edge, or the inside edge actually. And I did find that I need a servo extension, so I put that on first because the servo cable isn't long enough. And then I just tie a loop and then drag that servo wire through the wing. And I'm just going to pull it out the side here for a second, but there is another hole we need to poke to get the servo wire through. I'll show you that here in a second. So once I get everything lined up, get my servo square, I'm using this little hand drill to mark my holes for the screws. That's what it looks like mounted. I did use the rubber spacers. Mounted right on there, and then you can see here that just comes out there. And then when you flip it over, I've already done this on this particular wing in the video, but there's a little hole right there on the top side of the wing that you're going to push that servo wire through, and you'll get it out like that. So now I'm going to put the horn and the servo control rod on. These are the screws. They're what are these? Looks like they're 16 millimeter screws. And here's a servo horn and the servo horn back plate. Just trim off any of that excess plastic. All right, now we have the clevis and the rod. The rod is threaded on one end and not on the other. Should be pretty easy to find. And it'll thread straight into that clevis. I usually put it on about halfway, so I've got room to adjust in either direction. And then what I do is I go ahead and connect the clevis to the horn and get everything lined up to figure out where I want to put the horn, remembering that I want to make sure that all of the holes in the control horn line up with the hinge line for the ailerons. And again, using that hand drill to mark the 2 holes that I'm going to use for screwing the horn into the backing plate. And that's what it looks like after it's done. And then there's the excess screw length, and I'm just going to knock that off later with a Dremel. But for now, I'm not worried about it. Now, next thing I need to do is center my, or 90, I guess, my servo horn here, the servo arm. And I did that by just connecting to my receiver in the right channel, and then using my transmitter to get it, all the sub trim where I want it. And then once I have that, I'm going to mark with a Sharpie. I'm going to put a 90-degree bend in this rod. This gets me really close, and then I'll use screwing the clevis, the rod inside the clevis, to get it fine-tuned, and you'll see that here as I go. So actually, that's the process I'm doing right now. I'm looking for how the aileron surface lines up with the wing surface, and then just making adjustments there. I think I'm going to make one more turn, and that'll be good. All right. Once I have that sorted out, then I just put the little retainer clip on. And there we go. That's one wing with the servo and the servo horn, all that good stuff. All right. And works like I would hope it would. So I'm going to do the same thing, obviously, with the other wing. And then the next step here in this video is to join the 2 wing sections together. It has removable wings, but the left and right wing are joined, so the whole thing comes off as assembly. There's a little wood block here that we're going to epoxy in, and then there's a couple of small dowels here we're going to use as well. All right, the dowels go in to the front here. I'm just going to dry fit everything. I like to do that before I pull out the epoxy. Now, this is shaped very specifically. You can see that there's kind of a peak on the side and then a peak on the top. So it's definitely important to pay attention to how this goes in. So there's 2 peaks there. And if you watch how I put this in, hopefully you can catch that if you have any questions. The good thing here is if it's not right, it doesn't go together that smoothly. You want those wings to be mated just like that, with a little bit of dihedral built in, tilted up towards the top, which, by the way, on this particular airplane, the baby blue or light blue color is the bottom, if you didn't catch that. So also still dry fitting. I'm going to put it in here just to make sure everything lines up on the fuselage. And you can see there's this other little piece here that we're going to glue onto the wings, and that's actually what's going to hold it on. There's 2 screws, and that's how you remove the wings. And that clip also holds the bottom piece of the body. So we'll get to that in future videos. But for now, I just kind of want to make sure everything dry fits fine. You can see how those dowels are used. Don't accidentally glue your wing assembly to the fuselage. It might be tempting to do, but make sure you don't do that. And then this is going to go there. And then what I'm going to do is just trace this, because I need to cut out the cover underneath that so the epoxy can connect right with the wood there, wood to wood. All right, and that's what each wing is going to look like. It doesn't have to be perfect, and quite frankly, very little of it's actually visible. So I'm using a 30-minute epoxy here because I want plenty of time to make sure I have it just perfect as I'm putting it together. I did put a couple of dabs on the 2 surfaces of the wing that connect, and then, of course, I coat this joining block here, and then push it inside one wing, and then I will coat the other side and push it into the other wing. Make sure that your servo cables are down and out of the way. And once you start this process, then the clock is ticking. So the other thing I want to do is put this wood bracket on. Just like that. Now, I thought about clamping this outside of the airplane, but I actually decided it would be just as easy to go ahead and put the assembly together, make sure I don't have any epoxy in places I don't want it. So I used an acetone covered paper towel and made sure that I didn't have any epoxy, any stray epoxy that was going to get me hung up. And then I decided to go ahead and just mount it to the fuselage to ensure that everything is just perfect when it dries. That keeps it all perfectly aligned. Those two dowels are in their spots. The two screws are, there. So just kind of looking to make sure I don't have any epoxy eking out anywhere, which I didn't, because the whole point is to have the wing removable. But you can see where those servo wires come out into the body. And that's it. Basically, I'm going to let that bad boy dry overnight, just because I've got other things to do, and I come back the next day. And you can see how now we have the complete wing assembly for the Apollo 50. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.